Colin MacDonald has been the Chief Executive, Secretary for Internal Affairs, Secretary for Local Government and Government Chief Information Officer since 2012. Before that, he was a Chief Executive of the Land Information New Zealand, where he led the cross-government program for data and information reuse and established LINZ as a leader in the geospatial sector. Colin's got more than 30 years' experience in information technology and general management here and in the United Kingdom. To speak on managing data as a strategic government asset, please welcome Colin MacDonald.
Kia ora koutou, ina mana, ina reo, ina rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everyone. As the introduction said, I've worked both in the UK and in New Zealand, so just to make sure you understand, you're not having a sound illusion. I don't have a Kiwi accent. But I have been here for 20 years. And so I have a real sense of the sort of society that New Zealanders want to have. I've brought my 3 children up here. They're absolutely Kiwis, although they can mimic their father's accent quite effectively. But they're absolutely Kiwis, and they have Kiwi values. And I start by talking about Kiwi values because actually I think that one of the big challenges and the big opportunities at this time that Ian has just laid out for us is one where, as public service leaders, we are going to have to start to move some of the way that we have thought about information in some quite fundamental ways. So just to sort of build into that, if we think about some of the well-known information portals and information access areas like Stats New Zealand's website, like Statusphere, they're great places where people can access data in very controlled ways, very well managed ways. And that data is often anonymised data, or it's non-personal data. And I do want to just make a clear bookending of my comments here, that whatever we do now or in the future around the business of data and information management has to have privacy and citizen privacy right at the centre. These are absolute principles because, in my view, the relationship between the state and the citizen is built on trust. It can only be built on trust. And trust is either enhanced or reduced if citizens feel that their data and their information, that in many cases they're obliged to give to government, is not well protected. So that has to be maintained, but it has to be maintained in line with citizens' expectations. And I don't think, and I've got good evidence to show, that that is not a static position, that citizens' expectations around privacy shift over time. For example, in the early 1900s, the big privacy issue that was facing New Zealand was whether it was appropriate to publish photographs in the newspaper. That was the big privacy issue of the day in the early 1900s. It'd be nice to think that was still a debate. I'm sure there's some personalities and some famous people who'd prefer not to be appearing in the newspapers, but that one's really passed us by now. And I think in many ways we have to engage in the debate about what is it that New Zealanders as citizens and as members of our society want to see in terms of those privacy settings. I'm not advocating change, but I am certainly advocating that we have a debate and we have a discussion about it. In many ways, the day-to-day work that you do is sort of it's encapsulated within some of those settings. So when you think about the way you want to access data for statistical purposes, for the sorts of reasons that Ian was talking about to tailor services, then as a practitioner, I'm sure that you feel that there are many barriers that get in your way. There are things that make that really difficult. And those things are in place as broadly and primarily as a protection around citizens' information. But it has created, we do know that we've got a huge web of MOUs, of various mechanisms that allow those sharings to take place so that the data can be used. If we start to shift to think about data more as a strategic asset, then I think it's inevitable that we do think quite differently about those settings and have to ask some serious questions and have an informed and reasoned debate about some of those settings around privacy and those kind of protections. Because the principle of saying that we want to use data as a strategic asset does start to call into question some of those principles. Because if it's a strategic asset, it's something that we will start to share more broadly across the system. Some of the principles would be that there would be a sense of custodianship and a key custodian over certain types of data that would have a role in managing that data and ensuring that it was held and it was stewarded in a wider context, not just for the sole use for which it was collected. And as we all know, that's a current principle, that broadly speaking, you can only use data for the purpose for which it was collected. And hence, whenever we want to use information for something slightly differently, we have to create a mechanism that lets that happen. So if we start to shift the settings to say it's a strategic asset, then it does call some of those into question. And I was sort of thinking about my private sector experience. So when I came to New Zealand in 1994, I spent a year as a consultant, getting to know Wellington and the good places to work around town. And I couldn't get any of those people to employ me, so instead I joined ANZ Bank. And I worked there for a number of years, having always worked at that point in the private sector. Now, the private sector for a number of years has been using data as a strategic asset. It's been using it to tailor services. It's been using it to decide whether, when you go onto that website on Amazon and you browse for the luminaries, and decide whether you're going to buy it locally, or you're going to get the Kindle version, or you're going to get it shipped in from overseas. It will analyse your previous visits, and it will ask you, would you also like to have a look at this other very large, long, quite complex and difficult to read book, that you're undoubtedly at the end going to be really pleased you did it and feel that you've achieved something worthwhile. But it's been, you know, the private sector, you all know that, they don't do that by accident. They're doing it very much by design. They've been doing it for a long, long time. And so as Ian talks about the focus of results around better public services, stewardship and management of information is crucial to that. As a public service, there's no public service in the world that can deliver personal services through personal means. And that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about understanding at an individual citizen level, what are the needs of that citizen? What does that citizen need from the state? What is that citizen entitled to? And what are that citizen's obligations? And we can only achieve that through impersonal means. And that's by using data and information to help guide and shape our services. And a very practical example of that are the result areas around services, and that's results 9 and 10. And result 9 is really focusing on streamlining the relationship between business and government and making it easier to transact with government for businesses. And in a similar way, result 10 is about making it easier for citizens to do the same and to transact their business in a digital environment. Now, we're not going to be able to achieve that as a public service unless we are excellent at managing information, managing it securely, managing it safely, and making sure that we are tailoring services in an appropriate way and meeting the expectations of citizens around privacy and security of their information. We've recently been given the role of Government Chief Privacy Officer in recognition that this area is just simply going to become more and more important. So in a sense, I started by saying we have to look at some of our settings around how we manage information. And at the same time, the government is very much acknowledging that privacy must stay core to what we do with personal information. So what does all this mean for you? Well, I think it means that as we start to look at managing information as a more strategic asset, it does open the door for different opportunities. But to take advantage of that, it is vital that we are working more and more across the system, that we're looking at the system from a citizen's perspective, not sitting in our own agencies looking at it from an agency perspective. So we have to think about how we steward the information, how we manage information, and how we turn that into meaningful services for citizens from a citizen or a business's point of view, not from our point of view of agencies. So a core competency we must continue to build and develop is our ability to work across and work with colleagues in agencies and beyond into the non-profit sector and eventually into the for-profit sector. Because I can certainly foresee a time where services are being provided to citizens not by government, but actually by profit-making entities using appropriately secured government data. But we want to make sure, I think, in a world like that, that we're also helping people to analyse data in an appropriate way. I've been working in the field of open data for a number of years and was pleased to be involved in helping to get the Open Declaration through Cabinet some years ago. And I've been really pleased to see the way agencies have responded by putting more and more information out there. But inevitably, as you put more and more information out there, you run the risk that people are going to draw spurious conclusions from that information. And I remember back in the early days of the PC, yes, I was around when the PC was first launched, and then suddenly the great new white hope was desktop publishing. We could all become publishers. Well, I saw people producing some absolutely garish, awful pages very quickly. And we run the same risk with open government data, that as we put that data out there, people are going to draw potentially spurious conclusions. There is a very strong role for professional information managers and researchers to ensure that other voices are out in that debate. So in closing, the sort of what does this mean for you? Like Ian, I think it is a fantastic era, because information has finally come alive in terms of an understanding across government that it is an incredibly important asset. Having made that realisation, I think it is inevitable that we open up the debate about the key issues that will actually enable better use and better reuse of data. The privacy, protection and access debate. What is the right setting for New Zealand? How do we enable safe data sharing that is an enabling approach? And how do we take our current legislative settings, many of which, for very good reasons, prohibit the sharing of information and make them more enabling? So my request to you would be, please join in that debate. You're very knowledgeable about the issues and the opportunities, and you can really enhance the discussion that New Zealand has to have as a country about how we want to take the management of information forward. Thank you.